Commander Thrak stood before the classroom of young Corvani cadets, his battle-scarred face showing the weight of memories he wished he could forget. The holographic display behind him showed images of a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, images that had once seemed so promising to the Corvani Empire. Now they served as a warning. "Look at these structures," Thrak said, pointing to crude wooden buildings and primitive metal vehicles scattered across the human settlements. The cadets giggled among themselves, their purple skin shimmering with amusement. To their eyes, these humans appeared to be barely past the Stone Age, using combustion engines and kinetic weapons while the Corvani had mastered energy, manipulation for over 3,000 years. Thrak remembered when he had laughed. 15 years ago, as a junior tactical officer aboard the survey vessel Crimson Dawn, he had been part of the team that first analyzed human civilization. The reports they sent back to High Command painted a picture of a species so primitive that conquest seemed almost cruel. These creatures had barely reached their own moon using chemical rockets, while the Corvani traveled between star systems in ships powered by contained black holes. The initial reconnaissance had been thorough, or so they thought. Corvani drones observed human cities for months, watching their daily routines, studying their technology, analyzing their military capabilities. What they saw confirmed their assumptions about human inferiority. The creatures fought with projectile weapons that fired small metal pieces. Their vehicles moved on wheels like ancient Corvani artifacts found in museums. Their buildings showed no energy barriers, no plasma defenses, no gravitational shields. The High Command made their decision. Based on these observations, Thrak continued, his voice growing darker, they saw a species using gunpowder and fossil fuels and declared them unworthy of standard diplomatic contact protocols. Instead of offering trade agreements or alliance proposals, they decided to add another slave race to the Empire. The planning phase had been swift and confident. Military analysts calculated that a single battle fleet would be sufficient to overwhelm human defenses. The humans had no energy weapons, no shield technology, and no apparent understanding of faster-than-light travel. Their largest military vessels were primitive, chemical-powered ships that would be helpless against Corvani plasma cannons. Admiral Korvex, commanding the invasion fleet, had been annoyed at the assignment. Taking control of such a backward world seemed beneath his skills and experience. The fleet assembled for the human conquest was small by Corvani standards, consisting of only 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and support vessels. It was the kind of force typically used for suppressing minor rebellions on already conquered worlds. Thrak had been excited about his first major military operation. As a tactical officer fresh from the academy, he saw the human conquest as an opportunity to gain experience in a low-risk environment. The briefings assured all personnel that resistance would be minimal, and that human surrender would likely occur within days of the fleet's arrival in their solar system, the Intelligence. Reports detailed human military capabilities with clinical precision. Their most advanced fighter aircraft moved at speeds barely exceeding the speed of sound, while Corvani fighters could achieve significant fractions of light speed within planetary atmospheres. Human ground forces carried weapons that required physical ammunition, limiting their sustained combat capability. Their communication systems relied on electromagnetic radiation that could be easily jammed by Corvani technology. "We studied their wars," Thrak told his students, bringing up historical footage of human conflicts. "We watched them fight each other with primitive weapons and assumed they would be helpless against us. We saw their cities burning and thought it demonstrated their weakness. We observed their soldiers dying in trenches and concluded they lacked proper military doctrine." The Corvani Empire had conquered 47 different species over the past 2 millennia. Each conquest followed a predictable pattern. Superior technology would overwhelm primitive defenses, leading to rapid surrender and integration into the Empire as a client species. Some cultures resisted longer than others, but none had ever presented a serious challenge to Corvani military supremacy, human military technology. appeared centuries behind even the weakest species the Corvani had previously encountered. Their nuclear weapons seemed impressive by primitive standards, but Corvani personal shields could deflect radiation and energy that would vaporize unprotected organic matter. Their conventional explosives were crude chemical reactions that posed no threat to Corvani armor, the psychological profiles of humans, created by Corvani xenobiologists, suggested a species prone to internal conflict but lacking the unity necessary for effective resistance against external threats. Humans fought constantly among themselves, dividing their planet into hundreds of competing factions. This fragmentation was seen as a weakness that would prevent coordinated defense efforts. The final invasion plan assumed complete victory within 30 days, Thrak said, his voice barely above a whisper. We expected to establish orbital control within hours, eliminate human military forces within a week, and begin processing the population for integration into the Empire. The logistics division prepared holding facilities for human prisoners and calculated the resources needed to maintain order during the transition period. Pre-invasion intelligence had identified key human population centers and military installations. The plan called for surgical strikes to eliminate human command structures while preserving the infrastructure and labor force. Corvani forces would demonstrate their technological superiority through carefully controlled displays of power, shocking human leadership into immediate surrender. The cadets in Thrak's classroom had stopped laughing. Something in their instructors' tone suggested that the story would not unfold as the Corvani had expected. Several students leaned forward in their seats, sensing that they were about to learn something important about warfare and the dangers of underestimating potential enemies. Thrak activated another hologram showing the Corvani invasion fleet as it had appeared 15 years ago. Sleek vessels bristling with energy weapons and protected by shields that could deflect anything short of a stellar explosion. The fleet represented the pinnacle of Corvani military engineering, crewed by experienced warriors who had never known defeat. We departed for the human system with complete confidence in our mission, Thrak concluded. The humans appeared to be exactly what we expected: primitive, divided, and helpless. We believed we understood them completely based on our observations. We were wrong about everything. The Corvani invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system, their sensors immediately detecting the primitive electromagnetic chatter of human communications. Admiral Korvex ordered a standard intimidation display, positioning the fleet in a formation designed to demonstrate overwhelming force to any watching human observers. The plan called for humanity to witness Corvani technological superiority and surrender before actual combat became necessary. Thrak monitored his tactical displays from the bridge of the flagship Stellar Dominion, watching as human detection systems slowly became aware of the alien presence. The response was not what anyone expected. Instead of the panicked communications and desperate calls for mercy that typically followed first contact with primitive species, human transmissions became focused and purposeful. Military frequencies activated across their planet and defensive positions began coordinating with efficient precision. They should have been begging for mercy, Thrak told his students, his voice carrying the weight of bitter memory. Every other species we had encountered recognized their helplessness immediately. But the humans began preparing for war as if they had been expecting us all along. The first engagement occurred when human spacecraft approached the Corvani perimeter. These vessels were exactly as primitive as intelligence reports had indicated, using chemical propulsion and armed with kinetic weapons that should have been completely ineffective against Corvani shields. Admiral Korvex ordered warning shots to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Expecting immediate human withdrawal, instead the human ships accelerated directly toward the Corvani formation. Their weapons fired continuously, filling space with metal projectiles that bounced harmlessly off energy barriers designed to deflect plasma cannon fire. The attack appeared suicidal and pointless, confirming Corvani assumptions about human tactical incompetence. Then something unprecedented happened. When human weapons proved ineffective, the ships themselves became weapons. The lead human vessel increased velocity to maximum acceleration and crashed directly into a Corvani destroyer, its chemical fuel exploding on impact. The energy shields that protected against directed energy weapons proved less effective against the physical mass of an entire spacecraft traveling at enormous speed. No civilized species had ever done such a thing, Thrak explained to his increasingly horrified students. Ramming attacks violated every principle of sensible warfare. Ships represented significant resource investments and trained crews that could not be easily replaced. The humans treated their vessels like disposable ammunition. The psychological impact on Corvani forces was immediate and devastating. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses. When human ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews would detonate remaining explosives rather than attempt escape or surrender. The humans appeared to view their own deaths as tactical advantages rather than failures to be avoided. Admiral Korvex attempted to restore order by demonstrating superior firepower. Corvani plasma cannons vaporized several human vessels with single shots, creating expanding clouds of superheated gas where spacecraft had existed moments before. Surely this display of overwhelming force would convince the humans to recognize the futility of continued resistance. The human response was to send more ships. Vessels emerged from hidden positions throughout the solar system, many of them civilian craft hastily converted to military use. The humans had somehow managed to coordinate a system-wide mobilization in the brief time since the Corvani fleet's arrival, turning cargo haulers and passenger ships into makeshift warships loaded with explosives. They converted everything into weapons, Thrak continued, his voice growing quieter with each word. Passenger liners became guided missiles. Cargo ships became bomber craft loaded with nuclear devices. Even their space stations began moving toward our positions, their entire populations apparently willing to die to damage our fleet. The battle spread throughout the solar system as human forces refused to concentrate their defenses around their homeworld. Instead, they used the vast distances of space to force Corvani ships to spread their formation, making individual vessels vulnerable to swarm attacks by converted civilian spacecraft. The humans seemed to understand that their only advantage lay in numbers and their apparent willingness to trade lives for tactical gains. Corvani doctrine called for the preservation of infrastructure and populations during conquest operations. The goal was to add productive worlds to the empire, not to rule over ruins and graveyards. But human tactics made selective engagement impossible. Every human facility could potentially house weapons or serve as a launch platform for suicide attacks. The situation deteriorated further when Corvani forces attempted planetary assault operations. The humans had prepared their homeworld as a fortress, with defensive positions that made no strategic sense according to conventional military analysis. They fortified locations that offered no tactical advantages while abandoning positions that should have been vital to planetary defense. Ground combat revealed the true scope of human unpredictability. Corvani troops, protected by personal energy shields and armed with plasma weapons, should have swept aside human resistance with minimal effort. Instead, they encountered defenders who fought from positions designed to maximize casualties on both sides rather than preserve human lives. Human soldiers would detonate explosives that destroyed entire city blocks rather than allow Corvani forces to capture strategic positions. They used their own civilians as decoys and their own infrastructure as weapons. Buildings were rigged to collapse when Corvani troops entered them. Underground tunnels became death traps filled with chemical weapons that could penetrate Corvani. Environmental protection. They turned their cities into giant bombs, Thrak whispered, his voice barely audible in the silent classroom. Every school, every hospital, every residential building had been prepared as a potential battlefield. The humans fought as if their entire species had been planning for this war since birth. The most disturbing aspect of human resistance was their apparent lack of surrender protocols. Corvani military doctrine included detailed procedures for accepting enemy surrender and treating prisoners according to established standards. But the humans never attempted to surrender, never sought negotiations, and never showed any indication that they considered defeat a possibility. When Corvani forces captured human positions, they found evidence of preparations that suggested the humans had been expecting invasion for decades. Weapons caches, communication networks, and defensive plans that could only have been developed through long-term planning. The supposedly primitive humans had somehow anticipated exactly the kind of attack the Corvani were conducting. As the first phase of the invasion stalled, Admiral Corvex found himself facing a situation that violated everything he understood about warfare and conquest. The primitive species that should have surrendered within days was instead fighting with a ferocity and organization that seemed impossible given their technological limitations. Admiral Corvex made the decision that would haunt the Corvani Empire for generations. Frustrated by human resistance and convinced that greater force would break their will to fight, he authorized the use of heavy bombardment weapons against human population centers. The Admiral believed that demonstrating the true destructive capacity of Corvani technology would finally convince the humans to accept the inevitable. Thrak watched from his tactical station as orbital bombardment platforms charged their primary weapons. These devices could crack continents and boil oceans, representing the ultimate expression of Corvani military power. Surely no species could witness such destruction and continue fighting. The plan called for destroying several human cities as examples, after which surrender negotiations could begin. The first bombardment turned a human metropolis into a crater of molten glass that glowed for days. Afterward, satellite feeds showed the expanding cloud of vaporized matter that had once been home to millions of humans. Corvani Command waited for the inevitable communications from human leadership, offering unconditional surrender to prevent further devastation. Instead, the humans escalated. Within hours of the bombardment, human forces throughout the solar system began using weapons that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Chemical agents that could penetrate Corvani environmental suits appeared on battlefields where they had never been detected before. Biological weapons specifically designed to target Corvani physiology emerged from hidden laboratories. They had been studying us, Thrak explained to his stunned students. While we observed them, they were learning everything they could about our biology, our technology, our weaknesses. The moment we demonstrated that we were willing to destroy their cities, they began using weapons they had been developing specifically to kill us. The human response to orbital bombardment was to target Corvani ground forces with increasingly horrific weapons. Atmospheric processors designed to terraform worlds were converted into planet-wide chemical weapon systems. Human scientists had somehow developed compounds that could dissolve Corvani armor and neutralize energy shields. Through methods that defied understanding, worse still, the humans began using their own population as weapons. Infected civilians would approach Corvani positions carrying diseases engineered to target alien biology. Human children were trained to operate suicide devices, their small size allowing them to penetrate defensive perimeters that would stop adult infiltrators. The humans weaponized everything from their food supplies to their waste disposal systems. Corvani forces found themselves fighting an enemy that recognized no boundaries between military and civilian targets. Human resistance. Fighters operated from schools and hospitals, forcing Corvani troops to choose between avoiding civilian casualties and eliminating military threats. When Corvani commanders attempted to preserve non-combatants, human forces would use those very facilities as weapons. Manufacturing centers. The breaking point came when human scientists successfully reverse-engineered captured Corvani technology. Instead of using their newfound knowledge to build better defenses or attempt negotiations, they incorporated alien technology into weapon systems that surpassed anything in their previous arsenal. Human plasma weapons began appearing on battlefields, but these devices were designed with human tactical doctrines that emphasized maximum destruction over precision. "They took our technology and made it worse," Thrak said, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. "Where we designed weapons for precise military application, they created instruments of mass destruction. Where we built devices for specific tactical purposes, they made tools that could destroy entire regions. Human industrial capacity, primitive. As it appeared, proved adaptable in ways that shocked Corvani analysts. Factories that had produced consumer goods were converted overnight into weapons manufacturing facilities. The humans demonstrated an ability to retool their entire civilization for warfare that exceeded anything the Corvani had previously encountered. The most disturbing discovery was that human military preparation extended far beyond what reconnaissance had revealed. Underground facilities contained weapons and equipment that suggested decades of preparation for exactly the kind of invasion the Corvani were conducting. The humans had been ready for war with technologically superior aliens long before first contact occurred. Human defensive preparations included contingency plans that assumed the loss of major population centers and the collapse of conventional military command structures. Distributed command networks allowed human resistance to continue operating even after orbital bombardments destroyed traditional leadership centers. The humans fought as if they had always expected to face extinction-level threats. Corvani, psychological warfare specialists, attempted to break human morale through increasingly severe demonstrations of superior firepower. Entire human cities were vaporized from orbit, their populations given advance warning to evacuate as a demonstration of Corvani mercy. The intent was to show that resistance only increased suffering while surrender would be rewarded with relative safety. The humans responded by evacuating their cities and then using the abandoned urban areas as trap zones. Buildings were rigged with explosives and converted into kill zones designed to destroy any Corvani forces that attempted occupation. The humans seemed to view their own infrastructure as expendable resources in their war effort, abandoning centuries of development. To deny useful facilities to their enemies, human scientists worked with desperate efficiency to develop countermeasures for every Corvani weapon system. Energy shields were defeated through weapons that generated electromagnetic pulses, specifically tuned to disrupt Corvani technology. Plasma weapons were countered with materials that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. Every Corvani technological advantage was systematically analyzed and neutralized. They learned faster than we did, Thrak admitted to his students. Our weapons remained unchanged because they had proven effective against every previous enemy. But the humans adapted their technology daily, sometimes hourly, developing new countermeasures faster than we could modify our systems. The war that was supposed to last 30 days stretched into months as human resistance intensified rather than weakened. Corvani forces found themselves fighting an enemy that grew stronger with each engagement, learning from every defeat and incorporating captured technology into increasingly effective weapon systems. The primitive species was evolving into a military threat that challenged the technological superiority of the Corvani Empire. Admiral Corvex requested reinforcements from the home fleet, admitting that initial intelligence estimates had proven catastrophically inadequate. The humans were not the helpless primitives they appeared to be, but rather a species that had somehow developed military capabilities that exceeded their apparent technological level. The request for additional forces was the first acknowledgement that the Corvani Empire faced a genuine military threat from the species they had dismissed as primitive savages. The intelligence breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A damaged human data storage device recovered from a destroyed research facility contained historical records that fundamentally changed Corvani understanding of their enemy. The information revealed that human civilization was far older and more complex than initial observations had suggested, with a recorded history spanning thousands of years of continuous warfare and survival against impossible odds Thrak had been assigned to. The analysis team that decoded the human historical archives. What they discovered challenged every assumption the Corvani had made about human development and capabilities. The species that appeared primitive by galactic standards had actually been forging themselves into ultimate survivors through millennia of constant conflict and environmental challenges. We thought their lack of energy shields meant they were defenseless, Thrak explained to his students. We did not understand that they had learned to fight without them. We thought their chemical weapons were crude, and we did not realize they had been perfecting the art of killing for thousands of years. The historical records painted a picture of a species that had survived multiple extinction-level events on their homeworld. Massive climate changes, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and ice ages that would have destroyed most civilizations had only made humans more adaptable and resilient. They had developed technologies and strategies for surviving in environments that would kill most other known species. Human military history revealed tactical innovations that the Corvani had never encountered in their conquests of other worlds. These creatures had developed concepts like total war, scorched earth tactics, and asymmetric warfare through centuries of fighting against overwhelming odds. They understood that survival sometimes required sacrificing everything to deny victory. To enemies, the archaeological evidence was even more disturbing. Humans had driven dozens of species to extinction on their own planet, not through accident or environmental destruction, but through deliberate campaigns of extermination. They had developed biological weapons, chemical agents, and environmental manipulation techniques specifically designed to eliminate competing life forms. They were apex predators, Thrak told his increasingly silent students. Every other species we had conquered came from worlds where they had achieved dominance through intelligence, cooperation, or technological advancement. The humans had earned their position through pure survival capability. Analysis of human weapons development revealed a pattern that explained their rapid adaptation to Corvani technology. These creatures had been designing and deploying weapons of mass destruction against their own species for centuries. Nuclear weapons, biological agents, chemical warfare, environmental destruction. Humans had already explored every possible method of causing maximum destruction. The most shocking revelation was that humans had developed contingency plans for fighting technologically superior enemies long before achieving space travel. Their science fiction literature, which Corvani analysts had initially dismissed as primitive entertainment, actually contained detailed tactical analyses of alien invasion scenarios. The humans had been mentally preparing for exactly the kind of war the Corvani brought to them. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptability over technological superiority. Their training programs prepared soldiers to fight with whatever weapons were available, to improvise solutions to unexpected problems, and to continue operations even after losing conventional support systems. They had institutionalized the kind of flexibility that allowed rapid response to new threats. The cultural records revealed that humans viewed conflict as a natural and inevitable part of existence. Their entertainment media glorified warriors and celebrated tactical innovation. Their educational systems taught children to analyze historical battles and develop strategic thinking. Their entire civilization was structured around the assumption that they would always face new enemies and challenges. We discovered that humans had been preparing for us their entire existence, Thrak said, his voice carrying a note of respect that surprised his students. Not specifically for the Corvani Empire, but for any threat that might challenge their survival. They had spent thousands of years developing the skills and technologies needed to fight impossible wars. The intelligence analysis revealed that human technological development had been shaped by constant warfare and environmental pressures. Their material science had evolved from the need to create weapons and armor that could function in extreme conditions. Their energy systems had been designed to operate independently and resist attack. Their communication networks had been built to survive the destruction of major population centers. Human space exploration had been motivated primarily by military considerations rather than scientific curiosity. Their early space programs were designed to develop missile technology and orbital weapons platforms. Their plans for colonizing other worlds included detailed preparations for defending those colonies against unknown threats. They approached the universe with the assumption that they would face hostile forces. The psychological profiles created by Corvani xenobiologists proved completely inadequate for understanding human behavior. These creatures did not think like any other species the Corvani had encountered. They were capable of making sacrifices and accepting losses that would break the will of more civilized beings. They viewed death in battle as acceptable and sometimes preferable to surrender or defeat. Human social organization reflected their warrior culture in ways that initial observations had failed to detect. Their political systems rewarded leaders who demonstrated tactical competence and strategic thinking. Their economic structures prioritized resource allocation for defense and survival. Their scientific research focused heavily on applications that could provide military advantages. The humans were never primitive, Thrak concluded, his words carrying the weight of hard-earned understanding. They were simply fighting their wars with the tools they had available. When we gave them better tools by leaving our technology on their battlefields, we discovered what they were truly capable of achieving. The revelation that shattered Corvani confidence was the understanding that humans had not been surprised by the invasion. They had been expecting it. Their rapid mobilization and coordinated resistance indicated preparation that had been ongoing for decades or possibly centuries. The humans had somehow known that contact with alien civilizations would likely involve conflict. Evidence suggested that human governments had been developing contingency plans for alien invasion since their earliest space exploration efforts. Hidden research facilities had been working on weapons and strategies specifically designed for fighting technologically superior enemies. The humans had been ready for war before the Corvani fleet ever entered their solar system. The final piece of the puzzle was the discovery that humans had already achieved limited faster-than-light communication technology. They had been observing Corvani fleet movements long before the official first contact, gathering intelligence about alien capabilities and weaknesses. The supposedly primitive species had been studying their future enemies while those enemies dismissed them as harmless. The end came not with a single decisive battle, but with the gradual recognition that the Corvani Empire could not win a war of attrition against humanity. Admiral Korvex received reports from across the solar system that painted a picture of increasing human capabilities and decreasing Corvani effectiveness. What had begun as a simple conquest operation had evolved into the Empire's first genuine military defeat. Thrak monitored the withdrawal preparations from his station aboard the Stellar Dominion, watching as proud Corvani warriors prepared to abandon a battlefield for the first time in their recorded history. The fleet that had arrived with overwhelming confidence was departing with heavy losses and a profound understanding that they had encountered something unprecedented in galactic civilization. The human forces made no attempt to prevent the Corvani withdrawal. Instead, they watched from their positions throughout the solar system as the alien fleet regrouped and prepared to depart. The lack of pursuit was almost more disturbing than active attack would have been, suggesting that the humans were confident in their ability to handle any future Corvani operations. The final casualty reports were classified for decades. Thrak told his students, his voice heavy with the memory of defeat. We lost 40% of our fleet strength, including 2 heavy cruisers and Admiral Korvex himself. The humans achieved this while using technology that our initial assessments had dismissed as primitive and ineffective. The strategic implications of the failed invasion became clear as the surviving Corvani ships limped back toward Imperial space. Human forces had captured significant amounts of Corvani technology, including weapon systems, shield generators, and most critically, faster-than-light communication devices. The species that had been confined to a single solar system now possessed the tools needed for interstellar expansion. Intelligence reports indicated that human scientists were already reverse engineering captured Corvani technology with the same efficiency they had demonstrated during the war. But unlike other species that would use such knowledge to improve their quality of life or advance their civilization, the humans were incorporating every discovery into military applications. They were preparing for larger conflicts. The psychological impact on Corvani forces was profound and lasting. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves haunted by memories of an enemy that fought without regard for conventional military logic. The humans had demonstrated combat capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and civilization. They had shown that technological superiority meant nothing against an opponent willing to escalate beyond any rational limit, human. Communication intercepts during the withdrawal phase revealed preparations for rapid expansion beyond their homeworld. The species that had been confined to a single planet was already planning colonies throughout their local stellar region. More disturbing, their expansion plans included detailed defensive preparations and military installations, suggesting they expected future conflicts with alien civilizations. "The humans sent us a message as our fleet departed," Thrak said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It was not a threat or a demand for reparations or an expression of victory. It was a simple statement that every Corvani commander understood immediately: "We know where you live now." The implications of that message resonated throughout the Empire for years afterward. The humans possessed captured Corvani navigation data, stellar charts, and communication protocols. They knew the locations of Corvani worlds, the strength of Imperial defenses, and the routes used by military and commercial vessels. The species that had been dismissed as primitive now held detailed intelligence about their former attackers, Corvani. High Command spent months analyzing the failure of the human conquest operation. Every aspect of the invasion was studied, from initial intelligence gathering through final withdrawal. The conclusions challenged centuries of Imperial military doctrine and forced a complete reevaluation of how the Empire approached other species. The most disturbing finding was that human capabilities had been consistently underestimated at every stage of the operation. Intelligence failures, tactical miscalculations, and strategic errors had combined to create a disaster that could have been avoided through better preparation and more thorough analysis. The Empire had been defeated by their own assumptions about primitive species. Human technological development accelerated rapidly following the Corvani withdrawal. Observation posts detected massive construction projects throughout their solar system, including orbital shipyards, defensive platforms, and industrial facilities that dwarfed anything the humans had possessed before the invasion. They were using captured alien technology to build capabilities that would support interstellar expansion. Within 5 years of our departure, human ships began appearing in neighboring star systems, Thrak explained to his students. They were not exploring or seeking trade opportunities. They were establishing military outposts and gathering intelligence about potential threats. The humans had learned that the galaxy contained hostile forces, and they were preparing for future encounters. The Corvani Empire implemented new protocols for contact with unknown species, emphasizing thorough intelligence gathering and diplomatic engagement before considering military options. The human debacle had demonstrated the dangers of underestimating potential enemies and the importance of understanding alien cultures before attempting conquest or contact operations. Reports from Imperial intelligence networks indicated that humans were not content to remain in their local stellar region. Their expansion efforts were directed towards strategic positions that would allow them to monitor and potentially threaten major galactic trade routes. The species was positioning itself to become a significant power in galactic politics through military strength rather than technological advancement. The final insult came when human diplomats made contact with other species in the galactic community, offering military assistance and defensive alliances to worlds that felt threatened by larger powers. The humans were systematically undermining Imperial influence by positioning themselves as protectors of weaker civilizations. They had learned to use politics as effectively as they used warfare. The humans were never primitive, Thrak concluded, his words carrying the weight of painful experience. They were simply fighting their wars with the tools they had available. When we gave them better tools through our failed invasion, we discovered what they were truly capable of achieving. We taught them about the galaxy, and they became its newest apex predator. The classroom was silent as Thrak finished his account. The young Corvani cadets sat motionless, absorbing the implications of their instructor's words. They had entered the lecture expecting to learn about military tactics and conquest strategies. Instead, they had received a lesson about the dangers of underestimating potential enemies and the importance of understanding other species before making contact. "Remember this lesson?" Thrax said as he prepared to dismiss the class. "The universe contains species that measure advancement by their technology, their philosophy, or their artistic achievements. But there is one species that measures advancement by its ability to survive and fight. And that species is now spreading to the stars with capabilities that combine human adaptability with alien technology. They are out there, and they remember everything we taught them about warfare.